Welcome to the complete HTML and CSS course. In this course, we're going to learn how to build websites from a beginner to a professional level. And by the end of this course, we're going to build youtube.com. Now, you don't need any previous coding or technical experience. This course is designed to be your first step to becoming a software engineer. We're going to start from the very basics of HTML and CSS and build our way up step by step. And along the way, we're going to learn all the major skills that we need to create websites at a professional level. You can find the different sections of this course below the video here and here. And after each section, I'm going to give you a bunch of exercises that you can do on your own to practice the skills that we learned. In total, this course is going to have more than 100 exercises. Lastly, you don't have to worry about taking notes. I created an HTML and CSS reference that will list everything that we learn in this course. With that said, let's get started.
Can't trust your AI results? Let Bolium sift through one.
I'm going to be doing this course on a Mac, but everything is the same for a Windows computer. Before we begin, we're going to need two pieces of software, a web browser and a code editor. A web browser lets us view websites on the internet. It's also going to let us view the website that we create in this course. The most popular web browser for web development is Google Chrome. A code editor helps us write our HTML and CSS code. The most popular code editor for web development is called VS Code, or Visual Studio Code. To install both of these, we can go to google.com and then search for Google Chrome or for VS Code. And then open the first result and follow the instructions to download and install. Once we have those two installed, we can start the course. We'll begin by learning what is HTML. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. You don't have to worry about what that means. Just know that it's a tool that we use to create websites. Every website from YouTube to Google to Amazon uses a combination of HTML and CSS to create everything that we see on the website. The easiest way to understand what HTML is that we're simply giving instructions to a computer. We're telling the computer what to do step by step. The computer will then follow our instructions to create our website. So I find the best way to learn HTML is to jump in and give it a try. So we're going to create our first HTML file and our first website. Let's go to our computer and we're going to create a new folder. So this folder is going to contain all the code for this course. I'm going to call this HTML-CSS-course. Next, we're going to open this folder in our code editor. So I'm going to open VS Code. And then I'm going to click File, Open. And I'm going to find the folder that we just created, which is this one. Now, once that's open, you should see the folder name at the top here and on the side here. Now let's create our first HTML file. We're going to click this icon to create a new file. And we're going to call this file website.html. So we have to make sure that this file ends with .html. This tells the computer that this file contains HTML code rather than just text. So as I mentioned, HTML is basically some instructions you give to the computer. We're going to learn our first instruction, which is less than, button, greater than. And we also need to type less than / button greater than, but our code editor might autocomplete this for us. So this is an instruction to create a button. And inside the button, we're going to have the text hello. Now let's save our file and we're going to learn how to open this in our web browser. To open our new website, we're going to go to the folder that contains our code. We're going to find our HTML file. We're going to right click, open with Google Chrome. And now you can see that we have our first website that has a button with the text hello inside. And if we look back to our code, that's exactly the instruction that we gave to the computer. So as you can see, HTML is pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy to understand what's going on. Now let's try another instruction we can give to the computer. On a new line, we're going to type less than p greater than. And we also need to type less than /p greater than. And our code editor might autocomplete this for us too. So the P here stands for a paragraph. This is a paragraph of text. Inside a paragraph, we can put some text. So let's put the text, paragraph of text. Now we can save this. And to get our website to reflect our most current code, we're going to go to our web page and refresh. And now you can see that our website is displaying a paragraph of text, just like we told the computer to do. So that's basically how HTML works. The computer reads our HTML code from top to bottom, and then follows those instructions and creates a button and a paragraph of text. If we reverse the order of these lines, for example, if I put the paragraph up here, and I save it and refresh the page, then the paragraph will appear on top. Because again, the computer is just following our instructions one by one. Now I'm going to introduce some terminology. So each of these things that we're displaying on the web page is called an HTML element. So a button is a type of HTML element, and a paragraph is another type of HTML element. So element is just a generic term that we use to describe anything that we can display on the web page. And we're going to be using this term element throughout this course. So now I want to explain why we have to write all of these symbols, this less than, this greater than, and this less than slash. This is something called syntax. Syntax are the rules for how a coding language like HTML should be written. If you think of a language like English, we have something called grammar, which is the rules of the language. Syntax is basically the same thing except for coding languages. Now the biggest difference between a language like English and a coding language is that in English, you don't have to follow the rules of grammar perfectly. People can still understand you. But in a coding language, if you don't follow the rules of syntax, the computer won't understand your code. For example, let's break the rules of syntax by deleting this greater than symbol. And now we're going to save our file, and we're going to go to our website and refresh. And now you notice that our button is gone. And that's because we're not following the proper syntax, so the computer doesn't understand our HTML code anymore. So let's put that greater sign back so that we're following the proper rules of syntax. And we don't need this. So let's save and refresh our page. And now our button is back because we're following the rules of syntax. So what exactly are the syntax rules for HTML? So this part of the code is called an HTML tag. It basically tells the computer what we're trying to create. We write a tag by writing the less than symbol. This is the tag name, which tells the computer what kind of element we're trying to create, and then the greater than symbol. So every element consists of two tags, an opening tag and a closing tag. The closing tag is the same as the opening tag, except it has a slash in front of the tag name. That's how you can tell it is a closing tag. You can think of the opening tag as the start of the button and the closing tag as the end of the button, and then in between
काय
is the
काय अरे सर राहिलं लक्षातच नाही.
content or the text inside the button. And the same thing for the paragraph. The paragraph has an opening tag, a closing tag, and some content inside the paragraph. So as long as we follow these syntax rules for HTML, we have an opening tag and a closing tag, and the closing tag starts with a slash in front of the tag name, then our computer will know what to do and display our elements on our web page. The next element that we're going to learn is a link to another website. For example, if we go to Google and we search for something on Google, it will give us a bunch of links. And when we click these links, it will take us to another website. So we're going to learn how to do that in our HTML code. So we'll go back to our website here. And in our code, we're going to type less than a greater than. So this a here represents an anchor element. An anchor is basically a link to another website. So inside this anchor, we're going to put the text of our link. So let's put the text as link to YouTube. We're going to save this and then refresh. And now we have a link. But if we click this, it doesn't actually take us to YouTube. And that's because we haven't told the computer where this link is supposed to take us. Right now, we just have a link without a destination. So to set a website to link to, we have to learn a little bit more HTML syntax. So we're going to go into the opening tag and we're going to type space href equals double quotes, double quotes. So inside these quotes, we're going to copy and paste YouTube's website URL. So to get that, we can go to our webpage and then type in youtube.com. And at the top here, we have the URL. So we're going to copy this and paste this into our quotes. And now we're going to save our file. We're going to go back to our website and refresh. And now we have a link that we can click. So when we click this link, it's now going to take us to youtube.com. So that's how we create a link to another website with HTML.
Run Windows, Linux, and more on your Mac with unmatched performance.
Now let's go back here and explain what this syntax means. So this is called an HTML attribute. An attribute basically modifies how an element behaves. In this example, we're using the href attribute, and it determines where this link element will take us when we click it. Right now it's going to youtube.com, but if we change this, it will take us to a different website. So this attribute is modifying how the link element behaves. So the syntax rules for an attribute are we have to have a space between the attribute and the tag name. Otherwise, if I write href here, the browser is just going to think that this whole thing is a tag name. So that's why we have to have a space. So then we're going to have an equal sign and double quotes. So the text to the left of the equal sign is known as the attribute's name. And on the right side is the value. The value must be surrounded by double quotes, as you can see here. So you can kind of think of it like this. The name tells us what we're modifying. The value tells us what we are modifying it to. So the href tells us we're modifying the destination of this link, and we're modifying it to youtube.com. We can also have multiple attributes on an element. To add another attribute, we just separate it with a space, like this. And now we're going to add another attribute to our link element. And this one is called target. So the target attribute determines whether this link opens in the current page or in a new tab. So by default, if we don't have a target attribute, it opens in the current page, like this. But if we set the target attribute to underscore blank, now this link element will open in a new tab. So let's go to our webpage and refresh and click this link. YouTube will now open in a new tab. So by using attributes, we can modify different parts of this element's behavior. The href attribute modifies where this link goes, and the target attribute modifies whether this link opens in a new tab or in the current page. Keep in mind that the href and target attribute only work on the link element. The button and the paragraph elements have their own set of attributes that we can modify, and we're going to learn these later on in the course. But for now, I just wanted to introduce you to the idea of using attributes to modify our HTML elements. The last thing we're going to learn in this lesson is some weird quirks of the HTML syntax. So something that a lot of beginners have trouble with is that in HTML, if you have multiple spaces like this, for example, if we save this file and we reload, you'll notice that all of these spaces just appear as one space on the website. And that's because according to the syntax, extra spaces are essentially ignored. So beginners usually have trouble with this because, for example, if they want to add space between this button and this link, they would start adding spaces in front of the link, thinking that it will move it away from the button. So if we save this and we refresh, nothing happens. And that's because all of these spaces are essentially ignored in HTML. So later in the course, we're going to learn how to deal with these situations, but for now, just keep this in mind. So let's get rid of these extra spaces for now. And another weird quirk of this syntax rule is that if I put my cursor here, so this actually makes organizing our HTML code very flexible. For example, if I wanted some more space between these elements so that it's easier to read in my code, I can just add as much spaces as I want, and it won't get reflected in the website because extra spaces like these new lines are just ignored. A lot of people like to put the content of the element on its own line like this so that the tags basically align with each other in the same column. And same thing for here. You'll notice that this line is really long. We can actually add new lines here to make our code easier to read. So when we organize our code like this, we generally indent or add spaces in front of these lines. This helps us clearly tell the difference between the element's tags and its contents. If we didn't have this indenting, then it's pretty hard to tell where this element starts and where it ends, especially when we have a lot of code. Now your indents might look a little different from mine. It might look something like this, where you have more spaces than I do. This happens because by default, VS Code uses 4 spaces per indent. Generally in HTML and CSS, we use 2 spaces per indent. To update this, we're going to go down to this bottom toolbar and click this section. And then we're going to click indent using spaces, and we'll change this from 4 to 2. So now this file is going to use 2 spaces per indent. So we can get rid of this and press tab to have proper indenting. Now that only affects it for the current file. We can change it for every file going forward by going to the bottom left here and clicking this icon and then going into settings. And in here, we're going to search for tab size. And we're going to scroll down and we'll change the tab size from 4 to 2. All right, so we just learned the basics of HTML, how to write HTML code, and then turn that into a website. We also learned how to write HTML attributes, which modify the behavior of an element, and we learned about syntax, which are the rules that we have to follow when writing our code. Here are some exercises that you can try on your own to practice what we learned in this lesson. Feel free to pause the video here if you need to. You can find these solutions as well as more exercises on my website, supersimple.dev. The link is below the video. In this lesson, we're going to learn CSS, or Cascading Style Sheets. Based on the name, it's used to style our web page. So it's used to change the appearance of our HTML elements. So I've actually prepared a project that we can do in this lesson. So we're going to open this project by going to supersimple.dev/exercises/buttons. namely YouTube and Twitter. Go into our code, and we're actually going to create a buttons.html. And we're going to open our new HTML file in our browser.
कधी आलता बघून दे.
So let's open the folder that contains our code. We're going to right click, open with Google Chrome. And now I'm going to set this up by moving our reference design to the bottom like this, so that it's easier for us to copy it with CSS. I'm just going to move that to the corner, and then we can work here. So first, let's work on creating the subscribe button.
थांबा 2 मिनिटं. ती मला तुझ्या अकाउंट तरी चालू करून दे.
आपण ज्या व्यक्तीस कॉल करीत आहात तो व्यक्ती उत्तर देत नाही. कृपया
डोनेट बिनेट काय नाही आपल्याकडे. ते डोनेट पेक्षा बनपावाला जावं म्हणा पप्पांना. क्रीम हे सारखंच असते. फक्त हा पाव गोल असतो आणि क्रीम आतमध्ये असते बरोबर. आणि ते बनपावमध्ये फक्त थोडीशी टाकते ते. जा कॉपी ऑन करून जा.
So just like we learned before, we're going to create a button using HTML. So less than, button, greater than. And then inside our button, we're going to have the text subscribe. And now let's save and refresh our page. And now we have our button. Next, we're going to
ते अकाउंट हे चालू केलं ना मी. 2 मिनिटं थांबा. एवढं चालू करून का ठेवते हो मम्मी.
काय सगळे चालू करू. तुम्ही काय चालू केले.
पप्पांना म्हणा फोन के पप्पांचा फोन आला ना की पप्पांना सांग की म्हणा त्या लायसन वाल्याचं काय झालं म्हणायचं.
महिना कुठे झाले अजून.
अगं लर्निंग लायसन पण नाही आलं मम्मी अजून माझ्याकडे.
बरं.
त्याला म्हणा डाउनलोड होणं झालंय म्हणायचं. काय करावं आता.
We're going to start changing the appearance of this button so that it looks like the subscribe button from YouTube. Let's go into our code, and we're going to start writing some CSS to change the appearance of this HTML element. So to write CSS, we have to create a new element called a style element. So this style element is unique in that it doesn't appear visibly on the page. So for example, if we save our file and then we reload the page, the style element doesn't actually create anything.
AI won't replace accountants, but accountants who know AI will certainly replace.
So the purpose of this element is that inside this element we can write CSS code, which modifies the appearance of other elements. For example, let's write our first bit of CSS code. We're going to type button, open squiggly bracket, close squiggly bracket, right page. The style element doesn't actually create anything. So the purpose of this element is that inside this element we can write CSS code, which modifies the appearance of other elements. For example, let's write our first bit of CSS code. We're going to type button, open squiggly bracket, close squiggly bracket. And then inside these brackets, we're basically going to give instructions to the computer on how to modify the appearance. For example, we can set the background dash color colon red and semicolon. So make sure that you write this out exactly as I have it here so that we're following the syntax rules for CSS. So let's save this file and refresh our page. And now you can see that we set the background color of the button to red. So as you can see, CSS is similar to HTML. We're simply giving instructions to the computer, and then the computer follows our instructions step by step. And just like HTML, we have to follow certain syntax rules when writing our CSS so that the computer understands our code. So what are the syntax rules for CSS? How does this code work? So the word at the front here is called a CSS selector. It tells the computer which elements on the page we are targeting with our CSS code. In this case, we are targeting all buttons on the page, and we're going to change the background color of all buttons on the page to red. Now inside these brackets, there are other rules that we have to follow. The text to the left of this colon is called the CSS property. It tells the computer what we are changing. To the right of the colon is the CSS value. It tells the computer what we're changing the property to. In this case, we're changing the property background color to red, and that's exactly what the computer did. The colon is here to just separate the property and the value, and the semicolon here is just like a period in English. In English, you end sentences with a period. In CSS, you end a style with a semicolon. So that's what all of this syntax means. So we can actually add multiple styles inside these brackets. So let's go